Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with the monsters and demigods? Huge shout out to Sansika for this story. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. It was a normal day in New York, the streets were bustling with life, the birds were chirping, the factories ruining the air, and the satyrs were searching for half-bloods, yep, completely normal. That was until a yellow and orange comet crashed into the nearby woods, a few miles away from the city, leaving a crater nearly the size of a small pond. Oof, an unknown male voice grunted first. I gained immortality from Kurama, making me a fox demon to help me fight Kaguya. I fought her for a century, then fish dumped me through a portal to this wherever the hell I am. The voice ranted. His shouting attracted a nearby dryad, who was curious about the blonde. She approached very slowly, making sure she wouldn't be seen. That was until the blonde's head snapped up and looked at her. Yo. He called out and began jogging towards her. Can you tell me where I am? The dryad retreated a bit, causing the blonde stranger to stop. What's wrong? I'm not gonna harm you, I just need your help finding out where I am, he said, before deciding to sit down and let this strange woman approach him. After what felt like hours to the restless immortal blonde but was only 10 minutes, the dryad seemed to realize he didn't mean harm and approached him. You can see me? She asked, confused about how immortal could see her through the mist. Of course, I can see you, I'm not blind. The blonde snorted. Not what I meant, how can you, immortal, see me through the mist? She asked. The blonde snorted again. Well, first off, I'm immortal, second off, what the hell is the mist? The dryad blinked, then blinked again. You're immortal. Yeah, I'm a fox demon, this is my human form, he said, still feeling weird about the fact that his true form was now that of a large nine-tailed fox, courtesy of Kurama, who literally sacrificed his life for him. Man, he missed that fox and the arguments they had. The fox demon. The dryad scurried back a bit. Don't eat me please, she begged. Naruto tilted his head to the side and narrowed his eyes. Like a fox, why would I eat you? I may be a demon, but I'm not a monster. The dryad seemed to visibly calm down a bit, but she was still shaking. Oh, okay. Anyway, can you answer my earlier question, where am I? The blonde asked. Oh, sorry, you're in New York, she stated. New York? The blonde asked as if he'd never heard of the place before. Yes, New York, it's the place where Mount Olympus resides, the dryad said with a nod of her head. Mount Olympus? What is that? The blonde then looked around. I don't see a mountain around here, just those strange structures. He pointed towards the city. The dryad was confused about the blonde's lack of knowledge. Mount Olympus is the place where the gods live, she explained. Gods? The blonde then groaned. They're not insane and power hungry, right? I just barely survived a fight with an insane goddess, and I'm pretty sure my home is now destroyed. You fought a god? She shouted. The blonde quirked an eyebrow. Yeah, demon, remember, he pointed to himself, but she wasn't one of the gods that live on this Mount Olympus you mentioned. After all, I'm not from this world. Her eyes went wide hearing this. Not from this world? How'd you get here? She asked, intrigued. That's a long story, but the short of it is that the goddess I was fighting threw me through a portal that sent me to this world. Now, I'm stuck here and I don't think I can return, he said, sadness in his voice about being stuck here. That's terrible, she exclaimed. Would the goddess do that to you? She asked. Hell if I know, the blonde shrugged. She was insane, remember? She nodded. Since he did say that, so, I never got your name. Mine's Rosia. Naruto Namikaze, the blonde said, outstretching his hand. Rosia took it. Naruto, she said the word slowly, making sure she pronounced it right. What a unique name. She smiled. It means maelstrom, and I think your name is unique as well. He smiled at her. She blushed and was about to respond before a silver arrow whizzed past her and was caught by the blonde, much to her amazement, since she doubted most demigods could pull that off. Step away from the dryad, mortal. A female voice spoke from the nearby tree line. The blonde for his part didn't look fazed at all. He just glanced at the arrow he was holding and then glanced in the direction it came from. Why? Rosia and I were only talking. He then did something completely unexpected. He flipped the arrow so its nock was resting against his index finger with his thumb in a flicking position, and in a motion that was too fast for Rosia to see, he shot the arrow back into the tree line. A yelp of surprise was the response, and a girl who looked like she was 16 fell from a nearby tree, landing on her back. Oh, my bad. Meant to missed by a few feet. The blonde called out as if it was the simplest thing in the world. I'm used to kunai, not whatever that was. The girl got up, grumbled, marched over to the blonde, and grabbed him by the collar of his jacket. I should kill you right now, she hissed. You probably should, he remarked, causing the girl to look puzzled. However, you can't, he replied with a smile. Oh? Why can't I? She asked, with a tick mark on her forehead. Because I'm immortal. He casually said. This caused the girl to pause and look him up and down. You lie. She said with conviction. The blonde make a mock hurt face. I'd never. He then turned serious. Why don't you test it? He challenged. Ha. If you're immortal, then why did you catch my arrow? She mocked. Oh, that simple. He waved his hand dismissively. I like this jacket. The girl blinked multiple times. Really? That's why? He nodded. Bullshit. She yelled, pushing the blonde down. Nope, it's not now. Are you going to kill me or not? I'd like to return to my conversation with Rosia. Rosia had been quietly watching the interaction between the two. She knew who the girl was, and she herself was skeptical of the blonde's immortality. Fine. She roared, but it's your funeral. First, can you tell me your name? I'm Naruto. He asked. She paused in her rage and scrutinized him for a second. Zo Nightshade. Naruto Namikaze. He grinned. Okay, Zo, when I don't die how about you and I get some ice cream with Rosia? Zo just scoffed, wanting to kill him more for asking her out on a three-way date. Rosia for her part just blushed. HMPF, you won't be alive to do so. She said confidently. Is that a bet? He smirked. Sure. She shrugged now, prepared to die, foolish mortal. She then stabbed the blonde in the heart, causing the blonde to grunt and cough up some blood. She removed the blade from his chest. See, told you. She was cut off when the wound healed itself. She looked up at him and saw his shit-eating grin. So, about that date? He asked. She grumbled and said, I need to discuss that with Lady Artemis. Boy, you lost fair and square. The blonde barked. Shut up, I was stupid to even make that bet in the first place. She then whispered to herself, but Naruto's trained ears heard her. Lady Artemis is gonna kill me. Why would I kill you? An unknown voice, at least to Naruto, asked. Zo stiffened when another girl who looked to be younger than her emerged from the trees, her silver eyes on Zo, before they looked at Naruto. So, who's the mortal? Immortal. Naruto groaned loudly. I'm fucking immortal. Why does everyone keep saying I'm not? He yelled. Artemis paused and stared at him. Immortal. But you're not a god. No, I'm not. He remarked after calming down. Then what are you? Artemis asked. I don't know if I should tell you. The only one I currently trust with that secret is Rosia. The dryad in question promptly blushed. Artemis then turned to her. What is he? She asked. Rosia looked hesitant. She knew she couldn't defy a goddess, but Naruto had been nothing but kind to her. She looked at him with a pleading look, hoping he'd get the hidden message. Luckily for her, he did. Naruto sighed. Fine, if you're insistent enough to ask my new friend to betray my trust, I'll tell you so she doesn't have to. Artemis was a little shocked at this. She didn't expect him to stand up for the dryad like that. The blonde combed his hand through his hair. I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that you're a goddess. He said. Of course, I am a goddess. Did you seriously not recognize that? She asked. No, I did. After all, I just got done fighting one. It's just I'm not used to this world, so I wanted to make sure. This confused Artemis further. What are you? She asked in a more demanding tone. Naruto raised his hands in a placating manner. Relax, I'll tell you, but you need to promise me something. What? She asked impatiently. You have to promise not to attack me or tell anyone else. He said. She narrowed her eyes. Fine, I promise. She said. That doesn't sound reassuring. He chuckled. Fine. I swear on the river. Styx. Thunder was heard overhead. Odd, it looks sunny. Naruto remarked, before continuing when he saw Artemis's face. Alright, I'm a fox demon, specifically, the nine-tails fox demon. You don't look like a fox. Zo remarked. Of course I don't, I'm in my human form. He said like it was obvious. Then show me your true form. Artemis demanded. Only if our previous promise still stands. He said. Fine, it does. She said annoyed. Okay. With that he began to grow, changing shape until a massive nine-tailed fox stood over the three. Is this enough for you? He asked. Artemis looked up at him wide-eyed. She didn't believe him, but you know what they say, seeing is believing. Holy shit. Zo called out. So soft. Rosia said, as she rubbed the fur on one of his tails. Naruto just sweat dropped at her and said, I can return to my human form now, right? Rosia pouted. But I like your tails. I can keep them out in my human form if you like. Hell, maybe then people I meet will stop assuming I'm human. He used to be human, but after fighting an insane goddess for a century with almost no breaks, he slowly felt less human. He returned to his human form, keeping his tails and ears much to Rosia's delight. Artemis cleared her throat. Well, since I swore to the rive Styx I won't harm you. However, I'm curious what your intentions are. He shrugged. The worst I'd do is a prank. Well, maybe fight someone stupid enough to challenge me, and maybe fall in love, whatever feels right, but I'm not a bad guy, I swear. Swear on the river Styx? She asked. Sure, I swear on the river Styx. He said, and it thundered again. Good, now you can't break your word or you'd experience a lot of pain. She grinned. HMPF, then it's a good thing I never break my word. He said calmly before turning towards Zoe and Rosia. Now, about that date I was promised. That piqued Artemis's interest. Date. She looked at Zoe. What's he talking about? Zoe sighed. When he told me he was immortal I didn't believe him. He then challenged me to kill him and declared that me, him, and Rosia would go get ice cream when he survived. He then made it a bet when I got BP, and as you can see, I lost. Artemis nodded. Well, a bet is a bet, no matter how foolish it was. I give you permission this once. Zoe's eyes widened. But he is a male. She said, getting an indignant hey from Naruto. Maybe so, but he's also a demon, which puts him at a higher standing than normal males. Artemis shrugged, then walked away. Zoe couldn't believe it. Artemis never gave her huntresses permission to go on a date. What made this blonde different? Naruto said, looking at Rosia, who was still clinging to one of his tails. Shall we go get that ice cream? I haven't had dessert in a century. He walked off towards New York, as Rosia called it, with her following him, with Zoe joining them after a moment of hesitation. Naruto, Rosia, and a reluctant Zoe entered an ice cream stand that Zoe pointed them towards, since Rosia didn't know where one was and Naruto didn't for obvious reasons. What can I get you? The clerk behind the counter asked. This is when it dawned on Naruto he was flat broke. He turned to Zoe and chuckled nervously. Hey Zoe, what is the currency of this world? Zoe just glared at him for a hard moment, but eventually sighed, knowing it was pointless. She went on to explain in painful detail about all of the kinds of money in this world. When she was finished, she noticed that the blonde had been taking notes the whole time. I see, so I need to get a job to earn mortal money. How do I earn drachma? He asked. She hummed and thought there are many ways to earn it, but I guess the simplest way would be to go work at Camp Half-Blood. The blonde sighed, shoveling some of the ice cream that Zoe paid for in his mouth. So, a babysitter then? Huh? She asked. Well, it's a camp for half-bloods, and from what you told me on our walk here it's where they are trained, so essentially I'd be babysitting them. He then took on a thoughtful expression, though I admit it would be fun to learn some new sword styles. New? You already know some. Rosia chimed into the conversation. Well kinda, though I never really took the time to master it. Well, if you're going to Camp Half-Blood I'm not following you. Zoe said with a huff. Nah, I assumed you'd go back to Artemis after our date. After all, you probably got responsibilities. It's Lady Artemis. She reminded him for the umpteenth time. And yes, I do. Yeah, I'll call her that next time. He waved it off. That's what you said an hour ago. She growled. Well, I mean it this time, I promise. He grinned, then turned to Rosia. You coming with me to the camp? Is that okay? I'm a dryad, I mainly stick to the woods. I don't see why not. You do want to go, right? He asked. She nodded. Then let's go. He threw the plastic bowl the ice cream was in into the trash and gave Zoe a two-finger salute until our next date. Then he was gone in what appeared to be a flash of yellow, Rosia with him. Zoe blinked. How'd he do that? Then what he said sunk in. And there can't be another date. Lady Artemis gave me permission this one time. She grumbled to herself while leaving the shop. Oddly enough, she found herself a tiny bit sad that there wouldn't be another date, but she refused to break her vow. But Naruto and Rosia. Rosia lead him to the camp, wondering if the barrier would stop him. Sure enough, it tried. Oof, what the hell? Naruto forced his hand through the barrier, which was doing its best to fight back. He got annoyed after a few moments of trying and drew back his fist and was about to punch it with all his strength before Rosia stopped him. No. Don't do that, this barrier keeps the people inside safe from the monsters outside. He blinked, then looked sheepish and rubbed the back of his head. Sorry about that, Rosia, almost let my anger get the best of me. He turned his attention back to the barrier. So, how do I get in? I'm not sure. The barrier rejects all that isn't nature, half-blood, or God. Nature, huh? He asked, before sitting in a meditative position. What are you doing? Her question was answered when the nature around them began to flow into Naruto, and after a moment he opened his eyes. They were frog-like, but Rosia wasn't thinking about that. She could only be amazed at the feat. You're controlling nature like Pan. Who? Never mind, do you mean sage mode? I'm a sage, did I not tell you before? The violent shake of the head answered him. Oh, well, I can control nature's energy to boost my overall abilities. Rosia couldn't explain what she was feeling. Was it excitement? Maybe reverence. She didn't know, but what she did know was this man was stronger than Lord Pan, and she was going to serve him. Shall we go in, my lord? She said with a bow. Naruto choked and coughed. Lord. No, please don't call me that. Rosia tilted her head to the side. Then what should I call you? She asked. What you've been calling me, Naruto. Then it dawned on Naruto, dryad, nature, of course, she'd worship him. Another terrifying thought made its way into his head. The others are going to address me as Lord, aren't they? A nod was his only answer. He groaned, oh how he loathed titles. Well, let's go in. He then walked through the barrier. But Chiron. The centaur was enjoying a game of poker with Dionysus when a camper barged in. Chiron, there's a stranger in camp and he's with a dryad. They yelled before dashing back out. The centaur and the god exchanged looks and dashed after the camper. Sure enough, a blonde human. Were those fox tails and ears? Was surrounded by about 20 campers who were all ready to attack. He approached the crowd. What's going on here? His voice seemed to catch the blonde's attention. Oh. You must be Chiron. Zoe told me a lot about you earlier. You're the head of the camp, right? Chiron was a little shocked. This mortal walked into the camp as if it was nothing, and now he claims to know one of Artemis's huntresses. That is my name, but how do you know Zoe? He asked. Oh, we had a date earlier, her, me, and Rosia here. The blonde grinned. Okay, now Chiron was shocked, and it seemed Dionysus was as well. Date? With a huntress? The wine god asked. The blonde only nodded. Yeah, she lost a bet about whether I was immortal or not. The pair's shock only grew. Immortal? Chiron asked. Yep, though I've only been alive for a century. The blonde smiled. I've never heard of such a mortal. Dionysus said. Ah, yes, you wouldn't have since I'm not from this world. The blonde stated casually. The hits just keep on coming for the two. Come inside and explain. Chiron said. Okay, just don't attack me when I tell you. The blonde said, following the centaur into the main cabin. Chiron didn't understand why he said that, but he would in a few minutes. 30 minutes later. Well, Naruto, from our brief talk I see you're not exactly evil. Chiron then locked eyes with him, but I have to ask, what are your intentions? Lady Artemis asked the same thing when I talked with her, but I'm not here to cause trouble, I just want to make a living, and from what Zoe told me you could help me with that. You talked with Artemis and lived? Dionysus asked. Yeah, I think me being an immortal fox demon got me bonus points in her book. Chiron snorted. That, or she plans to hunt you in the future. She can't though, she swore on the river Styx that she wouldn't hurt me or tell anyone about me. He said. Oh, really? Then she truly respects you for some reason. Chiron said. What do you mean? He asked. You said she gave you permission to go on a date with one of her huntresses, right? The blonde nodded. Well, she's never once done that in all of her immortal life. Whoa, and she made an exception because of a bet? Naruto asked. Chiron chuckled. That, or she saw something in you. Well, whatever, no point in thinking about it now. He then clapped his hands together. So, how can I help? Should I train campers in some of the fighting styles I learned in my old world? Like hand-to-hand combat? Chiron asked, getting a nod from the blonde. I don't see why not, but there's the question of where you'll stay. Naruto hummed. I wonder if Artemis would mind if I stayed in her cabin. It thundered. Maybe not. He said, his face pale. Chiron chuckled. You can stay in the main cabin then, I think we can make room for you. Okay, what about Rosia? He looked at the said girl, who had been petting one of his tails the whole conversation. I'd like to stay with you, my lord Naruto. She corrected herself, but Chiron knew what she was going to say, but before he could ask his question was answered when a satyr walked in, took one look at Naruto, bowed as low as he could and shouted. It's an honor to meet you, my lord. To his credit, Naruto took it in stride. You don't have to call me that, I'm just a sage. Yes, my lord, but what would I call you? The satyr asked, tilting his head. Naruto, call me Naruto, please. The blonde practically begged. Yes, Lord Naruto. Before the blonde could respond, the satyr bowed again and left to complete his task. Naruto sighed. I'm never gonna get them to stop calling me that. Why do they call you that? Chiron asked. Well, I can control nature's energy to boost my abilities, and Rosia said I'm stronger than Pan when I do so. Chiron's eyes widened. Stronger than Pan. By the gods, I'm glad you're on our side. Naruto tilted his head like a fox. Why wouldn't I be? Fair point. Chiron chuckled. Now, how about we teach the kids? Naruto nodded, tapped Rosia on the head, and stood up. She's really attached to you, huh? Chiron asked. Seems so, but I don't mind, I like her too. Rosia blushed and buried her head into one of Naruto's tails, causing him to chuckle. Well, let's get to work, those kids aren't going to train themselves. He then saw a kid training himself. Well, most of them anyway. Naruto had spent the last year learning about the world he found himself in, teaching the campers, and hanging out with Rosia, who was officially his girlfriend, and surprisingly, she was the one to ask him out. 3 months into his stay at the camp, he knew he felt for her more than just a friend, but he wasn't sure how a relationship with a dryad worked, so he shoved his feelings aside. That was until she confessed. Boy, was she pleasantly shocked when Naruto locked lips with her a few seconds after her confession. About 5 months into his stay, he came across a girl with blonde hair and stormy gray eyes. He found out her name was Annabeth, and he was able to teach her a taijutsu style he knew that would work well with her knife, making her a deadly opponent to most. She had introduced him to her friend Luke, and Naruto was instantly put off by the boy. His demonic senses told him that the boy wasn't what he seemed, but Naruto couldn't do anything about it without making a stink, so he filed it away for later. 9 months into his stay, Rosia told him that her life was connected to a specific tree on the outskirts of the camp, since ironically Naruto landed relatively close to camp, at least close enough for her to hear his rant. His solution to this was to enforce her tree with enough natural energy to allow the tree to live forever, promising that she'd be immortal and that he'd protect her tree if it was the last thing he'd do. To back up his claim, he built a house around her tree and decided to live there. Tyron thought he was foolish at first, choosing to live outside of camp, but then he remembered that the blonde was stronger than Pan and that most monsters wouldn't risk a fight with him. He spent the remaining 3 months with Rosia in their shared home, while training the campers and hanging out with Chiron and Dionysus, who he'd actually managed to befriend. He was sitting on a bench that was on the front porch of the cabin, a sleeping Rosia in his lap when he noticed a group of campers hauling a boy into the medical area. His curiosity piqued, he woke up Rosia and explained what he saw to her. The two entered the medical area and questioned the head nurse. So, who was that kid? A newly found demigod. Over his stay he'd gotten used to demigods showing up with a satyr, and most of the time they came in injured. Yes, but we don't know which god. She said. Do demigods usually smell similar to their parents? He asked. The woman looked at him like he was stupid, but shrugged and answered sometimes. When the god in question is a strong one, why do you ask? No reason, he just smells like the sea. He remarked, sitting on a nearby sofa, Rosia once again finding perch in his lap. I think I'll wait for him to wake up, might make for interesting conversation. The nurse's eyes widened at the implication that this kid may be Poseidon's son. You think he's Poseidon's son? She asked him. Not sure, but from what I've learned over the months, probably. He said, resting his chin on top of Rosia's head and closing his eyes now. Please wake me up when he wakes up. 3 days later. Naruto was sitting on the same sofa from 3 days ago. The boy hadn't woken up that day, so he and Rosia returned to their usual schedule, returning to sit on the sofa every so often. He didn't know what made him interested in the boy. Maybe it was the prospect of meeting his father. He'd been wanting to have words with him for his treatment of Medusa, since he read about it in a book Chiron gave him to help him learn about this new world. Actually, the blonde wanted to have words with every god and goddess, except Hestia and Demeter, even though she did some mess up things she always had valid reasons. Hell, if someone raped his daughter he'd burn all of their corn too. He didn't plan on fighting them. No, the past is in the past, but he still found himself disappointed in how they behaved. He was broken from his thoughts when the boy began to stir. You're finally awake. Naruto said, looking at the boy, noticing his sea green eyes, further proving his theory. Who are you? The boy asked. Forgive me, I'm Naruto, Fox Demon of Camp Half-Blood. I've been Chiron's third in command for about 6 months now. He smiled. Fox Demon. But you aren't. The boy's eyes shifted to his 9 tails, then to his fox ears. Oh, the boy said. Naruto chuckled. Most people assume I'm human the first time they see me, but they usually change their minds once they notice my tails and ears. Now, what's your name? Percy Jackson. Percy responded. It's nice to meet you, Percy. So, where am I? Percy asked. Oh, you're at Camp Half-Blood, in the medical area to be precise. Percy nodded, then his eyes widened. My mom. Where is she? Naruto's eyes narrowed in confusion. I didn't see them bring anyone else in, however a satyr by the name of Grover kept checking up on you. Percy didn't seem to hear that last part, since he had a far-off look in his eyes. Naruto decided to leave the boy to his thoughts and turn his attention to Rosia, who was sleeping comfortably against his chest. He began to run his hands through her scarlet hair. Percy seemed to regain himself and notice what Naruto was doing. Who's she? He asked. This is Rosia, my eternal girlfriend. Eternal? Percy asked. Yes, you see, I'm immortal, but she wasn't due to her lifespan being tied to a tree, so to avoid that issue, I made her tree immortal. Even if someone tried to cut it down, it'd just grow back. Naruto explained. Wouldn't that hurt her? You know, having her tree destroyed. Percy asked. Yes, which is why I vowed to keep her tree safe with my life. But you're immortal. Percy pointed out. True, but that doesn't make my vow any less true. Naruto said. Percy didn't get it, so he decided to change the subject. How long have you been alive? 138 years, though I spent 121 of them fighting an immortal goddess. Percy's eyes widened, internally deciding to not piss this guy off. So, how strong are you? He knew it was a dumb question, but he was curious. Not sure, I haven't fought someone that pushed me to use my full abilities yet. No one here has seen the full scope of my abilities. Percy nodded, but before he could ask another question Grover's voice hit his ears and he was glumped by the satyr. Percy? You're awake. Grover cried out. His shout woke up Rosia, who turned over in Naruto's lap and groggily stared at the two. I was having a pleasant dream. Sorry. Percy apologized. Grover's reaction was more animated. He got up, flung his arms around frantically, and said sorry. He then looked at Naruto, and his eyes widened when he felt the amount of natural energy the blonde emitted. Naruto, seeing this, decided to put a stop to it. Don't call me Lord. Grover snapped his mouth shut since he was just about to call him that. Then what do I call you? Why do they all ask that? Naruto groaned, with Rosia chuckling at him. You can call me Naruto, and don't you dare call me Lord Naruto. It's bad enough I can't get the others to stop, I don't need another. Percy was completely lost. What do you mean, Lord? Grover turned to him, shock evident on his face. You mean you can't tell? He's giving off more natural energy than Lord Pan. Percy's eyes widened since he'd read about Pan and his enormous power. Really? Yes. Grover said, violently shaking Percy. That's how I was able to make Rosia's tree immortal. Naruto stated. Wait. Grover said, you can make trees immortal. Yes, why do you ask? Grover looked down, seemingly in deep thought. He then looked up at Naruto. Could you free someone from a tree? Naruto's eyes widened. I don't know, never tried. Can you? Grover asked, almost pleading. I guess, but I need to understand the full story. Grover's face lit up. Then I better go get Annabeth, she'd be better at telling the story. He then dashed off. After a moment he returned with a confused Annabeth. What's this about? She asked them. Lord Grover started but stopped when Naruto shot him a glare. He continued nervously, Naruto has a strong connection to nature, so strong that he was able to make a dryad's tree immortal. Annabeth blinked at this information before grabbing Naruto's shoulders. Can you free someone from a tree? She asked the same question that Grover asked a few minutes ago. This only confused Naruto further, since it was obvious that both she and Grover were desperate to know. He sighed after a moment. I don't know, but I'm willing to try. He said, and his heart tightened at the pleading look in the usually strong-willed girl. Please try, she pleaded. He nodded. Show me this tree. He stood up, Rosia sliding off of him, much to her disappointment. He looked at Percy. We'll be back in a few. He then pecked Rosia on the lips and asked, you coming? The blushing dryad only nodded. The four left the medical area, heading towards the tree that sustained the border. Annabeth had tears in her eyes as she looked at the tree. Naruto could tell that she wasn't going to tell him anything about the tree. It was clearly a very emotional subject. He looked at Grover, hoping the satyr had the fortitude to bear whatever pain this tree caused. So, there's a person trapped in this tree. Grover blinked, the question breaking him from his thoughts. Yes, she was a friend of ours a few years ago. I was leading them to the camp while we were being followed by monsters. He paused to regain his emotions. We wouldn't have made it. She stayed back to give us time to enter the camp. She was killed while defending us. Zeus took pity on her and turned her into this tree. She protects the camp. Naruto took a moment to register this, and when it all sank in, he felt admiration for the girl who willingly sacrificed herself for her friends. I see, I'll try my best to free her. He said. The determination in his eyes made Grover smile. Naruto placed his hand on the tree and pushed natural energy into it. The tree contorted and grew a few feet taller. The base of the tree began to separate, and an unconscious girl was slowly pushed out of the tree. She had short, spiky black hair, fair skin, and electric blue eyes. She looked like she was 13. Annabeth's eyes widened at the sight of her long-lost friend. The tears that had already formed in her eyes began to freely flow down her face. Naruto approached the girl and put 2 fingers on her neck and sighed in relief when he found a pulse. He looked at the crying Annabeth. She's alive. Annabeth lunged at Naruto, burying her head in his chest, thanking the blonde repeatedly. Naruto only smiled and slowly rubbed her back as she let her emotions loose on his chest. His attention was brought towards the unconscious girl, who was beginning to stir. Where am I? She groggily asked. She then looked at Naruto. Who are you? She apparently didn't notice Annabeth, Grover, or Rosia. Her attention was solely on the blonde. I'm Naruto Namikaze, Fox Demon of Camp Half-Blood. He introduced himself. The girl's eyes widened at the name Fox Demon and instantly got to her feet and took a guarded stance. Naruto frowned at this. He normally wouldn't admit it out loud, but it deeply hurt his feelings whenever someone reacted this way after learning what he was, but he knew it was unavoidable. Annabeth, whose head was still buried in the blonde's chest, felt it tighten. Confused, she looked up at him and flinched at the pained look in his eyes. She'd only seen that look when people reacted negatively when they heard he was a demon. She glanced in the direction he was looking and saw her friend Thalia in a defensive posture, glaring at Naruto. Thalia, who had finally noticed Annabeth, shouted at her, "Get away from this monster, we need to get to the camp." Annabeth once again glanced at Naruto and was shocked to see a lone tear fall from one of his eyes. She felt angry at her friend, but before she could do anything she felt herself be gently pushed off of his chest. Looking at him she found that he was no longer next to her, but was slowly walking away, his ears drooping, and his 9 usually majestic tails sagging behind him, showing his sadness. Rosea quickly followed after him. When he left, Thalia was a little confused about his departure, and her confusion grew when Annabeth glared at her. "Would you say that to him?" she shouted at Thalia. "It's thanks to him that you're free from that tree." She pointed at the tree in question. "Huh?" Thalia asked, visibly confused, "But he said he was a demon. Why would a demon save me?" Annabeth slapped her forehead. "You idiot, did you not hear what he said?" Thalia took a thinking pose. "He said he was Naruto Fox demon of camp." Half-blood realization hit her like a ton of bricks. He was a demon who lived in the camp they were going to, which meant he wasn't evil. Guilt struck her heart, and she looked at the ground. Annabeth, seeing this, sighed and placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's alright, you had only recently woke up and were dazed and confused. Your reaction was a valid one." This didn't make the guilt go away. She had insulted the person who'd apparently saved her life and seemingly hurt his feelings. Then something else dawned on her. Since when was Annabeth this tall? "Annabeth," she started, looking at her. "Why are you taller?" Annabeth blinked at this, before realizing that it had been 5 years since her friend died. She still had a hard time believing she was alive, but she was overjoyed that she was. "It's been 5 years since you died and Zeus turned you into that tree," she said, once again pointing at the tree. "Huh?" Thalia asked, completely lost. Annabeth sighed and gestured for Thalia to sit and began explaining everything to her. With Naruto. The blonde had found perch on a rock that overlooked the camp. He was deep in thought about what Annabeth's friend had said. He knew that he was a demon, there was no denying that, and he knew that he should expect reactions like that, but fuck did it hurt to be called a monster. He was broken from his thoughts when something landed in his lap. Looking at it, he found Rosea sitting there, her head buried in his chest, her arms draped around his neck. "You're not a demon," she started, looking up at him. "You're Naruto, and nothing will change that." Naruto's heart warmed hearing this, and he wrapped his arms around her. "I'm both," he said, continuing when he saw her confusion. "I'm Naruto and a fox demon. There's no point in denying what I am. That isn't what upset me, it's the way she looked at me." The hatred in her eyes was palpable. Rosea tilted her head. "Why would she hate you that much just for being a demon?" "I'm not sure, it could be the fact that she died to monsters." He was cut off by footsteps behind them. Turning, he saw that Grover was approaching them. Hey," he said with a wave as he sat next to them. "Don't take what Thalia said to heart. She's had bad experiences with monsters and hates them with a passion." Naruto nodded. "I figured as much. Where's she at now?" "Annabeth is catching Thalia up on what she missed. From what I gathered, she regrets what she said to you." Naruto waved his hand dismissively. "She shouldn't." Her reaction was completely valid, even if it hurt to see that level of hatred directed at me. Grover stared at his feet. "Yeah, I guess you're right." Naruto looked back at the camp. He could see the many campers going about their usual business, from training to chatting with friends. He loved it here, it was peaceful in an odd way. He was again broken from his thoughts by footsteps, which belonged to Annabeth and Thalia, who looked nervous. Her eyes were glued to his ears and tails. After a moment of silence, she spoke up. "I'm sorry I called you a monster," she said, her eyes never leaving the blonde's tails, seemingly transfixed with them. "Don't worry about it, sure it hurt, but you're sorry, and that's enough for me." He then noticed her gaze and smirked. He started whipping his tails around behind him. "You like my tails?" The girl blushed at being caught staring. "What?" "Oh, yeah, kinda. I've never seen anything like them before. And why do you have 9? He chuckled at the question. "I have 9 tails because they show my level of power." Thalia tilted her head in confusion. "Power?" she asked. Naruto nodded. "Yes. How do I explain this in a way you'd understand?" He took a thinking pose, temporarily removing his arms from Rosea's back. "You know the goddess Artemis?" Thalia nodded. "Well, I met her a year ago, and from what I sensed from her power is equivalent to one of my tails." This statement made all 3 of their eyes go wide. "Only one?" Annabeth asked, dumbstruck. "Yes, as it stands I don't think there's a single person in this world who could beat me in a fight." Thalia stared in awe. Here was a man who, if his words were true, was unrivaled by anyone in the world, and she wanted to attack him. "I knew you were strong since you're stronger than Lord Pan, but I had no idea it was to this extent," Grover said, still in shock. Naruto chuckled sheepishly. "Well, don't get any ideas, I have no intentions of fighting without a good reason. In my previous world, I fought constantly since I was 12 years old until I turned 137 and was cast into this world by an insane goddess." "Wait, you're 137 and from another world?" Thalia shouted. 138 actually, and yes, that goddess I mentioned threw me into this world after I fought her for 121 years. "You fought a goddess for 121 years?" she shouted again. Naruto laughed at her. Yeah, I still find myself wondering what happened afterward, but it's probably safe to assume that the world as I knew it is gone. He said with a sad smile, before looking down at Rosia, who was peacefully sleeping in his lap. But I think I like this world more, sure there's still conflict, but it's not as bad. Plus I get to train you half-bloods, so you guys have a better chance at survival. You're a teacher? Thalia asked. Yeah, I helped Chiron train the kids here. His attention was brought to a new set of footsteps that were approaching them. He saw that it was Claris, a girl with dark eyes and pale brown hair. She had a habit of mocking him about his fox features. Yeah, he's kinda like the camp's pet fox, she joked, getting a glare from Annabeth and Grover. Naruto didn't seem affected in the slightest. Hey Claris, how's your training going? He asked in a cheerful tone, which confused Annabeth and Grover. She made a so-so gesture with her hands. I hate to admit it, but I improve better when I train with you. He chucked. Well, I'll be free this afternoon, so I'm down for a training session. Claris pumped her fist in the air, a gesture that was odd for her. Yes. She cheered, before realizing what she'd done and cleared her throat to retain some dignity. I mean, looking forward to it. She then rushed off. Why weren't you mad about her calling you a pet? Annabeth asked. Oh, because I know she doesn't mean it. She's had respect for me ever since I single-handedly beat the entire Ares cabin in a spar. He said with a shrug. All of them? She asked. Yeah. You should have seen it. It was awesome. Grover said excitedly. Wish I had, Annabeth said before looking at Thalia. Well, I should probably show Thalia around the camp and also find Luke to tell him the good news. Okay, I guess Rosia, Grover, and I will head back to the medical area and let Percy know about this. Percy? Thalia asked. He's the newest demigod at camp, and if my nose is correct, he's a powerful one like you. What do you mean like me? She asked. Well, he reeks of the sea, and according to a nurse, powerful half-bloods can smell like their parents, so it's my personal deduction that his dad's Poseidon. Whoa, so he's like my first cousin? She asked. I guess so, though nearly all demigods are related in some way. But you two are definitely closely related. He answered, before standing up, holding the sleeping Rosia bridal style. Anyway, talk to you later Thalia, it was a pleasure to meet you. You too. She said with a smile. He walked towards the medical center with Grover following, after saying his own goodbyes to Thalia and Annabeth. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, like the video now and share the story with your friends. Bye bye.